Have you ever wondered why life feels like a system you were never given the manual for, yet you are expected to operate flawlessly every single day? This question alone can shake something deep inside us, because the moment we admit that life behaves more like a complex network than a linear path, everything we thought we understood begins to shift. Life is not a straight line. It is a system of hidden interactions, subtle signals, feedback loops, and psychological patterns that shape our reality long before we notice them. And when someone becomes even slightly more aware of these structures, the experience of living changes. You start to sense what others overlook. You recognize emotional codes behind conversations. You notice the silent tensions that guide human behavior. It feels as if the world is revealing its architecture, and suddenly you are no longer operating on autopilot. But this awakening does not make life easier. In fact, it often isolates you. The deeper your perception becomes, the more you realize how disconnected most people are from the real mechanism behind their choices. You see the illusions people cling to, the stories they defend, the unconscious loops they follow without questioning, and at the same time you feel an internal pull to understand the system even more deeply, as if life itself were inviting you into a new level of operation. This moment can be both empowering and unsettling because once you notice the hidden design of human experience, you cannot unsee it. You stand at the edge between ordinary perception and elevated awareness, navigating a reality that feels more fluid, more intricate, more alive than before. And this is why your engagement matters. Have you ever felt this shift inside you? The sense that life is not random but responsive, that your awareness influences the entire system around you? If this resonates, tell me in the comments what part of this awakening you have sensed in your own life. Understanding this content is essential to operate your inner system with clarity, so make sure to leave your like and check if you are subscribed to the channel. What comes next will expand this perspective even further, guiding you into deeper layers of this complex structure and preparing you for what unfolds next as the system continues to reveal itself. When you begin to sense the invisible architecture behind daily experiences, something subtle happens inside you. You realize that life is not driven by isolated events, but by patterns. These patterns behave like underlying codes, shaping your reactions, your expectations, and even the opportunities that appear before you. Most people mistake these repeating cycles for coincidence, but once your awareness sharpens, you see that nothing in a complex system functions without structure. Emotional loops, social conditioning, ancestral beliefs, and subconscious habits all operate like interconnected circuits. And the moment you recognize one of these circuits, you start to understand why certain situations in your life seem to return again and again, wearing different faces but carrying the same energetic signature. This recognition can feel unsettling at first because it reveals that many of your choices were not truly choices. They were responses programmed by pattern recognition, developed long before your conscious mind arrived to interpret them. But here lies a quiet power. The more clearly you perceive these hidden designs, the more freedom you gain inside the system itself. Awareness becomes a kind of internal software update, allowing you to navigate complexity with greater intelligence. Suddenly, you notice the triggers that steer conversations, the emotional cues that activate defenses, the subtle dynamics that shape relationships. You see how people move through predictable sequences without knowing they are following a script written by their own unexamined histories. And as this perception expands, something else becomes clear. The system is not trying to trap you. It is responding to you. Every thought, every emotional resonance, every belief you hold becomes a signal that the world mirrors back in some form. This is why recognizing patterns is so essential. You are not merely observing life, you are influencing it. The system reacts to your internal state like a living organism, adjusting to new information. And the more consciously you operate within it, the more the system reshapes itself around your awareness, revealing deeper layers that were previously inaccessible. As your awareness expands and the patterns of life become more visible, you begin to understand something even more profound. The mind operates like the central processor of this entire system. It filters every experience, categorizes every emotion, and assigns meaning long before you consciously decide what something truly is. This mental structure is not random. It is built from accumulated beliefs, memories, fears, and desires that shape your perception in ways you rarely question. When you observe this internal machinery at work, you see how many of your reactions are simply automated responses, as if your mind were running an old program that no longer fits the complexity of your current reality. The fascinating part is that your mind is not your enemy. It is a system trying to protect you by predicting outcomes based on past experiences. But when the mind becomes the only lens through which you view life, you operate in a limited mode, repeating the same emotional loops and reinforcing outdated narratives. Once you begin witnessing these loops from a higher state of awareness, a new kind of clarity emerges. You notice how your thoughts create internal feedback that shapes your emotional state, and how this emotional state influences the signals you send back into the world. It becomes clear that your mind is not only interpreting reality, but actively participating in creating it. And as this realization deepens, you start to sense the gap between who you are and the identity your mind constructed to navigate the world. This identity, built from survival strategies and inherited expectations, often masks your true perception. But when you step outside these mental frameworks, even for a moment, you feel the system shift. The world seems less threatening, relationships become more transparent, and decisions carry a different weight. You recognize that your inner software can evolve, allowing you to operate life with a quieter, more intelligent presence, one that aligns with a deeper understanding of how consciousness interacts with the system around you. There comes a moment in this inner evolution when the structures you once relied on begin to dissolve. It does not happen dramatically. It feels more like a quiet collapse, an internal shift where the old version of you simply can no longer sustain itself. The beliefs that anchored your identity weaken, the roles you played lose their meaning, and the emotional narratives that once shaped your reactions start to fade. This is not a crisis, it is a transformation. But from the outside, it may look like you are withdrawing, becoming distant, more selective with your energy. People around you may not understand this transition because what is crumbling inside you is invisible to them, yet profoundly real to you. As your perception sharpens, you begin to sense things that previously passed unnoticed. You read intentions behind words, you detect emotional dissonance in conversations, and you feel the heaviness of environments that no longer resonate with your inner state. This heightened awareness naturally creates distance. You are no longer able to participate in superficial interactions the way you once did, because your internal system demands authenticity, alignment, and coherence. This shift can create friction in relationships that were built on your old patterns. You realize that some dynamics were sustained only by your willingness to ignore your deeper truth, and now that truth stands louder than ever. This phase can feel isolating, but the isolation is not a punishment. It is a recalibration. It gives your inner system space to reorganize, to rebuild from a place of clarity rather than habit. You start to see which connections nourish your growth and which ones drain your energy. You also notice how certain environments amplify your awareness, while others suppress it. These insights are not meant to separate you from the world, but to help you operate within it with greater intelligence and integrity, aligning your external reality with your expanding inner perception. If any part of this inner collapse resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments and describe what shifts you have felt during your own transformation. It is through these reflections that your awareness continues to unfold into deeper layers. As your inner system continues to reorganize itself, you begin to understand that maintaining consciousness in the midst of chaos is not about retreating from the world, but about learning how not to absorb what does not belong to you. Most people move through life reacting to every emotional current around them, unknowingly merging with the noise of environments that drain their clarity. But once your awareness grows, you start to see that chaotic spaces reveal more about your inner state than your outer circumstances. They teach you where your boundaries leak, where your attention disperses, and where your energy becomes vulnerable to external influence. Instead of fighting the chaos, you observe it. You begin to notice the subtle shifts in your emotional field when you enter a room, the unspoken tensions between people, the energetic patterns that unfold during conflict or confusion. This observation does not overwhelm you, it informs you. It shows you how the external world mirrors the internal landscape you carry, and the more your perception stabilizes, the less reactive you become. Chaos stops being a threat and becomes a measurement tool, helping you understand how centered you truly are. With this new level of perception, you start to operate differently. You pause before responding. You sense the emotional weight behind situations instead of getting entangled in them. You recognize that every environment carries its own frequency, and not all frequencies deserve access to your inner system. As a result, you move with more intention, more calm, more internal space. You choose your interactions with precision, guided not by fear or avoidance, but by clarity. This internal steadiness allows you to stay awake within environments where most people shut down or react impulsively. And slowly, something fundamental shifts. You no longer depend on peaceful surroundings to feel aligned. You create alignment from within. Your presence becomes the stabilizing force in the room, the quiet center inside the storm, the part of the system that does not collapse under pressure, but expands into deeper awareness. As your inner stability grows and the noise of the external world loses its power over your emotional state, a new dimension of awareness begins to unfold. You start to perceive truths that were always present, yet invisible to those who remain trapped in unconscious patterns. These truths do not appear through dramatic revelations. They emerge quietly, like subtle shifts in perception that reshape how you interpret reality. You notice the intentions people try to hide, the emotional inconsistencies in their stories, and the unspoken motivations driving their actions. What once seemed confusing now becomes clear, almost predictable, because you are no longer observing life through the filters of old wounds or outdated beliefs. This deeper perception begins to alter your behavior in ways you might not expect. You speak less, yet your words carry more weight. You listen more closely, not just to what someone says, but to the energy beneath their words. You stop feeling responsible for fixing or absorbing the emotional chaos of others, because you now understand that every person operates from the level of awareness they have reached. This realization frees you from unnecessary conflict and allows you to navigate interactions with more grace and intelligence. You sense when to step forward, when to withdraw, and when to simply remain neutral, letting the system unfold without your interference. At the same time, your connection with yourself deepens. You become more aware of your own emotional patterns and the subtle reactions that once dictated your decisions. The truth reveals itself not only in others but in you, and as this inner clarity expands, your behavior naturally shifts. You choose environments that align with your growth, relationships that honor your authenticity, and actions that reflect the awareness you have cultivated. These changes are not forced. They happen effortlessly, guided by the new perception taking root within you. Through this process, life begins to feel less like a series of random experiences and more like a responsive system communicating with you. The more aligned you become, the more clearly the system reflects your state of consciousness, revealing deeper layers that continue to transform how you operate within it. As your awareness expands into these deeper layers of perception, you begin to understand that seeing more than others comes with a cost. It is not a punishment nor a burden you are meant to carry with resentment. It is simply the natural consequence of operating at a level of consciousness that many have not yet reached. You start to sense the emotional distance that forms when your inner clarity no longer aligns with the dynamics around you. Conversations feel different, social settings feel heavier, and interactions that once seemed effortless now require a level of energetic management you were not aware of before. This shift is not about superiority, it is about resonance. When your inner frequency changes, so does the world you inhabit. With this new perception, isolation becomes less of a discomfort and more of a space for integration. You begin to value silence not as an escape, but as a necessary environment for your internal system to reorganize itself. Moments alone feel purposeful, almost sacred, because they allow your mind and emotions to settle into the expanded awareness you are cultivating. You no longer fear the distance that forms between you and the patterns you have outgrown. Instead, you understand that this distance creates room for a more authentic version of yourself to emerge. This isolation also reveals another truth. People who are not ready to see what you see may resist your growth, misinterpret your silence, or attempt to pull you back into familiar frameworks. But you sense that moving backward is no longer possible. Your perception will not shrink. Your awareness will not dim. So you learn to navigate relationships with a softer detachment, allowing others to follow their own timing while you honor the pace of your evolution. And in this quiet reconstruction of your inner world, something powerful happens. You begin to rebuild your identity not through external validation, but through the clarity of your own perception. The system shifts around you because the operator has changed. If this phase of isolation and inner rebuilding resonates with your experience, share your perspective in the comments and describe how this transformation has shaped your path so far. As your inner reconstruction gains strength and your perception sharpens into something more precise, you begin to understand that life operates less like a sequence of events and more like an interconnected ecosystem shaped by psychological, emotional, and energetic exchanges. Everything you experience is influenced by subtle dynamics occurring beneath the surface, dynamics that most people overlook because they are focused only on what is obvious. But once you reach this expanded level of awareness, you start to sense how environments respond to your presence, how people mirror your internal state, and how your inner frequency interacts with the world around you. Life becomes less about reacting to circumstances and more about interpreting the signals woven into the system itself. This realization transforms the way you move through reality. You begin to see that nothing is isolated. A thought influences an emotion influences a decision influences a pattern, and that pattern influences the environment around you. It is all part of a larger system that responds to every shift in your awareness. The more aligned you become internally, the smoother the external world seems to function. Conflicts dissipate, opportunities appear at the right moment, and people who resonate with your growth naturally draw closer. This is not coincidence, it is coherence. You are operating from a state where your inner system and the external environment begin to synchronize. In this expanded understanding, you also notice how easily the unconscious mind can disrupt this harmony. Old emotional residues, unhealed memories, and internal contradictions act like interference signals, distorting your perception and pulling you back into familiar patterns. But now you can recognize these distortions for what they are, echoes of a past identity that no longer matches the awareness you carry. This clarity allows you to adjust your internal alignment before the system responds, preventing unnecessary cycles from repeating themselves. As you continue navigating life with this deeper intelligence, it becomes clear that your internal state is not merely a private experience, but a force that shapes the reality you step into. The system responds to you because you are an active component within it, influencing its direction through every subtle shift of consciousness. As this deeper awareness becomes your new baseline, you begin to understand that operating life intelligently has less to do with controlling outcomes and more to do with managing your internal state. The system around you is constantly shifting, constantly responding, constantly mirroring what you project into it. When your mind is scattered, the world feels unstable. When your emotions are tangled, the system presents confusion. But when you cultivate presence, clarity, and self-mastery, life behaves differently. It becomes more cooperative, more fluid, more aligned with your intentions. This is not magic or philosophy. It is the natural behavior of a complex system, adjusting itself to the operator's state of consciousness. You start noticing how much power exists in subtle decisions. A pause before speaking prevents cycles of conflict. A moment of self-reflection changes the entire trajectory of a situation. A shift in emotional frequency diffuses tension without a single word. These are not small actions. They are internal commands that reorganize the system around you. Presence becomes a form of intelligence. It allows you to navigate interactions without being overwhelmed, to respond without reacting, and to make choices that reflect who you are becoming rather than who you used to be. Operating with this level of awareness also means recognizing the difference between instinct and conditioning. Instinct arises from clarity, from deep internal alignment. Conditioning arises from fear, repetition, and unconscious loops. When you learn to distinguish these two forces, your decisions transform. You stop acting from old narratives and begin responding from a grounded sense of truth. This shift not only elevates your experience of life, but changes the way others experience you. Your presence influences the environment, guiding interactions toward balance. Without effort, the more you practice this internal refinement, the more the system reveals its coherence. You start to sense the right timing for action, the right moment for silence, the right direction for growth. Operating life with intelligence becomes less about strategy and more about alignment, less about prediction and more about perception. It is a continuous dialogue between your inner world and the system responding to it, revealing yet another layer of complexity waiting to unfold. As you continue moving through life with this expanded perception, the system begins to reveal itself as something far more responsive than you once imagined. It behaves almost like a living organism, constantly adjusting itself to the quality of your awareness. The more clarity you hold, the more the system reorganizes around that clarity, opening paths that previously felt unreachable. You start to sense the subtle rhythm beneath events, the quiet intelligence guiding transitions, the way environments shift as your inner state evolves. Life becomes less of a puzzle to solve and more of a conversation to navigate, a continuous exchange between your consciousness and the unfolding landscape around you. With this understanding, you begin to operate from a place of cooperation rather than resistance. You notice how forcing outcomes disrupts the natural flow, while alignment allows opportunities to arise with ease. Decisions become lighter, interactions become cleaner, and your presence carries a level of coherence that influences everything you touch. You recognize that the system is not trying to challenge you or test you, it is reflecting you. And the more grounded, clear, and awake you become, the more the system responds with pathways that support your evolution. This shift does not mean life becomes perfect. It means you learn to move with life instead of against it. You begin to trust the intelligence woven into each moment, sensing that even the unexpected carries meaning. You learn to follow the subtle currents that lead you toward deeper understanding, and the system responds by revealing more of its structure, more of its opportunities, more of its hidden order. Operating life with lucidity becomes less about effort and more about presence, less about control and more about awareness. If you have reached this point of the video, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me, so I know you are walking this path with clarity." And if this content brought value to your awareness, make sure you are subscribed and leave your like to help this space grow. There is another video right here that continues this exploration. Just click and keep moving through this system with me as it unfolds into even deeper layers of understanding.